Such a lovely beginning of the day. Yeah. "20 years ago, Erlang was banned within Ericsson radio. This means that if you had a product that was using Erlang and that product was in use and production, you were allowed to continue using Erlang for that product. But you had to make a plan, a long-term plan or a short-term plan to stop using Erlang in the near future. If you wanted to start a new product, you were not allowed to use Erlang for it. And this ban came as a surprise. Erlang was doomed. Flying the Erlang flag was something you were not willing to do within Ericsson. Like, you would not be favored by middle management. And at that moment, Erlang was selling products that were using, Ericsson was using, Erlang, at that moment, Ericsson was selling products that were using Erlang. For instance, EPRS is one of them. And yet, it was banned. But there was one woman in the CS lab, the woman that you can see in that picture, that was key to the survival of Erlang. Without her, Erlang would be a dead language by now. Do you want to hear that story? Do you want to hear other stories about how other women have helped give safe to the community and to the big environment? Keep listening. I'm Miriam Pena, and I was born in a little town on the northwest of Spain, in that area that's called Galicia. And that's where I studied my master in computer science by La Coruña University, like so many other women that we know from there. I've been doing Erlang since 2005, and mostly Erlang, like 90% of my time was Erlang. I don't think I can get out anymore. I work as a staff engineer in Adwell. Until very recently, I was one of the tech leads with Mike of the real-time bidding systems. And now I have moved to handle the ad servers, which are also using Erlang. That's my Twitter handle in case you want to tweet about me or you want to ask me any question, or if you're interested in any of the documentation I'm going to present. I have everything. You can just write to me, and I'm very happy to share. Oh. And this is when everyone shows a picture of the dog and their cat to look more human, and I don't have any of those, so this is the closest I have to a pet. So my journey with Erlang, as Francesco was saying, has really made me travel around the world. I've been doing Erlang in Egypt, in Sweden, in Ireland, in Madrid, and also here in San Francisco in the last 2 years. And I work in a lot of industries. I've implemented Erlang for solar power stations, more than 15 types of protocols. There are hundreds of machines we were monitoring. Also, I use Erlang for in-depth devices. We installed it on cars that were shipped on the fields, and we were capturing live statistics, reading data from every ECU they have. I've also worked in a chat server who is serving chat messages for over 1 million concurrent users. We had to make a lot of fancy stuff to Java-D to make it scale for us. But it was so much fun, especially when they complain in Twitter. And now I work at Adwell. Adwell is a marketing company. We serve ads. At least we serve ads of things that you care about. We serve ads of things that you see in the near past. So that's something good. And we serve over 1 million of these per second. And you might wonder, why is he here? Why me? So what happened is last November, a website called Women 2.0 selected me as one of the 12 inspired female staff engineers to watch in 2018, which is great, honestly. Who doesn't like one of these things? But I didn't really think too much of it. But 1 month later, I went to Spain for Christmas to see my family and enjoy some peaceful time with them. And that story got picked up by press. And over the course of 2-3 weeks, I appeared over 50 times in 12 different kind of interviews in radio, in TV, and newspapers. And that was really wild. Especially because up until that moment, I've always avoided exposure my work. I've never done public speaking. I don't tweet. I don't do blog posts. I I've open source things, but I don't give them publicity. I'm basically trying to be as hidden as possible from every one of you. So this was hard, but it was worth it. You know why? Because Erlang was probably one of the first times in use in Spain. It was presented as a language that brings successful career. You get to work with really complex problems, and you get to work with really smart people. And this specialization is something that I was spreading, that is something I used to aim. And also lots of people wrote me thank you messages. Parents said their daughters were inspired by me, and now they wanted to study computer science, and they want to travel the world. So it was kind of cool. It almost felt like suddenly doing backend engineer, that didn't seem such a weird career choice for a young lady. Honestly, for me, it was really surprising, and I didn't want it to be like that. I want something like my case to be a normal case. And that got me thinking, what can I do to support the women and to make them more visible? What can I do to encourage young ladies to be in their schools? And this is how this talk started. I went back to my expertise, that is Erlang, so I thought, why not talk about the women in Erlang? I mean, we are not that many, but we are here, and we are doing amazing things. And just let's talk about the people you would not normally talk about, because there are so many things that have happened in the Erlang history that were driven by women, and this is what I'm here to tell. Let's talk about the unsung heroes of the meme. And for this, let's go back in time. A little bit further back, please. Let's take a peek about how technological advances look like in 1984. That was the year in which the first Macintosh came out. In 1984, it was also the first tech talk, and it did not really go well. It was a disaster, and that's why they didn't try again for another 6 years. It was also the year in which Motorola launched the first mobile device, a device so small that you could actually fit in your pocket. It was the 80s, after all. Also, there was a suburb at the south of Stockholm in Sweden. There was a small laboratory of Ericsson in which there was a group of people who believed that no language was well suited for telecom systems development. And they proposed to create a software laboratory to help on that, to create that technology. And this is how the CS Lab was created. And this document marks the history, marks a moment in which it was created. And if you can learn proper Swedish, can you do it? I can translate. The responsibility of the CS Lab in the long term is to develop a software technology for future telecommunication systems, and in the short term to help introduce new software technology in current projects. That's a purpose. We have a department with a purpose. And if you look very careful at the top, you can see that this document is signed by Eva Salomonsson. And she was a manager that supported, and she headed the department in which the CS Lab belonged to. And what do you do when you have a department, when you have a purpose, and you have a budget? What do? You spend the budget. And how can you spend a budget? Please don't tell me parties. You hire people. And this is how our friends, our very known friends, came in the picture.
Who's the person with the black hair?
I don't know. Here we see them, so young, so full of energy, doing a bunch of programming prototypes in pretty much every language that was available at that time. And also, since they have a budget, these were the happy days before the IT crisis. They really have a lot of money at that time. So they could really afford free-floating activities like this fantastic ferry to Ireland, where they were doing workshops. And shortly after, the first experiments of Erlang came, adding processes in top of Prolog, and Erlang was born in 1987. So now we have a language, and we need some users for it. And the first team that were users of this language, as far as I know, there was a team based in Baltimore for 4 or 5 people led by Kerstin Odling. Kerstin wanted to experiment doing an architecture layer. She wanted to do a basic operating system layer and application operating system layer on top. And they needed a language to do it, so they got in touch with Varner, and they made an agreement, and for 6 months they were meeting twice a week to discuss functionalities for this language. And they would propose something. If it works out, they add it to the language. If it doesn't work out, they take it out. And surprisingly, the fact that the language changed literally every 3 days didn't really bother them too much. And after these 6 months, there was a report that came out of it. This is the actual report, and this was a little bit controversial because it says that the combination between these architectural layers with using Erlang as a language came as a conclusion that the language was in between 9 and 20 times faster from the from the developer point of view. Like what you would do in 22 hours in Plex, it will take 1 hour in Erlang with this architecture. And this was a big polemic, so eventually they just lowered the number to 3. It's just a random number, which means it's basically so much better, but it's not incredibly better than the one believes it. But there was also another conclusion from this report. It was that Erlang needs to be 40 times faster. Prolog wasn't great. And this is, I believe, when Joe came back to the table, they started studying, they're reading papers, they're reading books, they were blocked for a little bit. And eventually they come up with a new virtual machine, this time in C. And this time, it was 70 times faster, yay. But, news from the team came back. And apparently they did a little bit of miscalculation, so it wasn't really enough. And at this time, I think this is my interpretation, but I thought that having a new virtual machine was so cool that they didn't really focus on performance, but to do the new cool stuff like adding garbage collection or receive change. Like they were aware that there was a performance issue, but they just thought that they needed to do other things. So this was a little bit left on the side. But as the concurrent programming in Erlang first edition book says, without Kerstin and her project, Erlang would never have achieved that level of quality. And these ideas from this prototyping work later went straight directly into OTP. So thank you, Kerstin. So we'll go on just a little bit on time until 1990. There was this International City Symposium, which was really, really expected. They've been preparing it for months. They've been preparing documentation, brochures. They hire people to have a stall in the trade fair. They run round-the-clock demonstrations. And this is a picture they took at the park. The purpose of this was to present Erlang to the world for the first time. They make companies use it. And this actually resulted on several new users. And Belker was one of them. And if you look closely to the picture, you will see a woman down there. And that woman is Marie Johnson. And I believe she was one of the first software engineers that the CS Lab had. She spent some time doing prototypes on visual, on graphical interface. There were many prototypes running in the CS Lab at that moment. This was one of them. And this is an extract from the documentation of her work. And you can see, if you want to see it, it was basically with 15 lines of code, you could actually create this lovely telephone thing that you could use to make calls. So it was really cool. But there was another thing which is so important from her, is that she did her master in Uppsala University, so she had really good connections with the university. So eventually, the staff from there, they approached her to come up with a project idea and some funding. The whole idea was to have some students, I think 19 students that would do their master thesis in Erlang. And she wanted them to be the tutor of those students. Of course, Jorne accepted, and this relationship started, the relationship with Uppsala, which, as you all know, has brought so many good things to the community. And these students later became part of the department Erlang Systems from Ericsson. That was a department that was created to help spread Erlang within Ericsson. They were doing, they were teaching Erlang, they were doing documentation. One last thing, there was another prototype in 1995, this one from Janine. In 3 months, they were doing an experiment in a team led by 13 people, 7 of which were women, by the way. And they created a working prototype system in surprisingly short time. And it was really surprisingly short time. Like Ericsson management was in shock, and this kind of marked a moment in which they believed that Erlang was like a really viable technology for this kind of projects and solutions. And who is the woman who is next to Janine? Her name is Katrin Granholm. At this moment, it was so clear for Ericsson that they wanted to sell it outside, that Erlang was the right thing, that they created this industrialization project to make it happen. And the goal of it was to take create documentation, create pamphlets, have a team of salespeople, and polish the language in a way that you could actually sell to companies. And Katrin Granholm was the lead of it, was the leader of this project. And later on, she became the manager of the Erlang OTP product unit. And if you see down there, the chap on the right is Seth Tordestan, who was one of the first that proposed the creation of the CS Lab on the first place in the 1980s, and started its whole development. So we are in the middle of an industrialization project, and one of the first documentation that came out of this was this systems overview. This is the first version 1 of it. And this was created to sell Erlang within Ericsson. It was like a 60-page book. And this title, Open Telecom Platform, open was a buzzword at that time. Like it had the name of this version of Erlang has to be OTP, because it has to use that word, has to use the word open, but no one really knew what open means. Very few people knew what open means, but it has to be. And that version was nothing but open. It was definitely just a buzzword there. And don't confuse this with the OTPT. That started 1 year later. This is the first version of Erlang. And we have 3 versions of this systems overview. And there is this anecdote that Francesco told me once, that he once entered the room in which Joe was, and Joe brought his book out, and he said something like, "Have you seen this? This is amazing. This doesn't say anything which has a really technical value, but management love it. We need more of this." Maybe that's made up by me. But this documentation was created by Anna Fedorov. She was the first technical writer that the CS Lab had. And quoting Francesco, she was one of the first persons who produced non-technical marketing material that management understood. And prior to that, it was just Erlang the movie style. She changed all that. So, thank you, Anna. And she did more stuff, so many more stuff. She really sent me like a huge folder out of documentation. Thank you, it was amazing. But for instance, this first one is a brochure that they were using to sell Erlang for outside companies. And that's an extract from the user guide. I mean, the whole goal was to make a policy documentation that they could use to sell. And lastly, we needed salespeople to sell the language. And this is when Jane Wanderwood entered the picture. I think she was a computer science groupie at Stanford. She did her BA there, and then she moved to Sweden. And she took a job at Ericsson. She wanted something easy, sell Erlang. And this is when we came to 1998. This is 20 years ago. And as a context, so at this moment, Erlang has been proved to be a suitable large-scale industrial technology for projects. Projects were successful. We have the GPRS, we have the 18-man switch. It was being sold outside. Erlang was spreading. Since it was not open source, it was based on non-disclosure agreement. I believe they have 40 of these agreements spread out to different entities by that time. And suddenly, on February 1998, Erlang was banned. And why did this happen? Well, it was really hard to sell. Like, Ericsson has been trying to sell Erlang for a few years already, and they weren't really successful at it. I think they weren't really any sales. And also there was so much open source software that no one was willing to buy it. It was so hard to convince people, even within Ericsson, it was really hard to convince people to learn Erlang because it wasn't really such a great career move. Imagine you have to learn a language that you can only use in your current company. You'd probably be a little bit hesitant to do that if it didn't have any purpose outside. And there was not enough users to keep it dynamic. They have to create their own libraries. So they had bad experiences with previous proprietary languages. So it actually really made a lot of sense for Ericsson to ban Erlang. And this got people mad. People was extremely unhappy. Things got really hairy. Because if it was impossible to sell Erlang while they were using it, can you sell a product that you yourself are not willing to use? It's not going to happen. So the solution was to give it away. They needed to make it open source. And by that time, they have a precedent. Netscape has just recently open source code Mozilla browser. So it became apparent that even big companies like Netscape were willing to do open source of their stuff. So Erlang needed to be open source too. And this is when Jane moved to the CS lab. Well, she loves these people, she loved them, but it was really hard for her to fit in. The history says that when she first entered the lab, someone said, "Who is this person?" She was wearing high heels and a skirt. And someone said something like, "Oh, she's gonna stay here, she's gonna work here from now on." And then that first person said, "She will never fit in!" and it was hard. But she really loves people like us. She loves Erlang. This is an amazing person. And we really owe her to make this happen. And Jane was the person who made Erlang open source. Jane knew how to talk the right language. And so she started lobbying the management committee that was responsible for Erlang development to persuade it and to approve an open source release. She built the good relationships with the people. The main argument was that if you open source Erlang, it will be easier for Ericsson to recruit Erlang developers. And the principal objection was really that they were concerned with patterns. But eventually, they got an approval, and Erlang was open source, December 1998. And it took 1 year. It took 1 year to get this happen, and it was so hard. And people they just couldn't believe it. Like the minute Erlang was open source, they just downloaded a copy right away of it with the right license because they were scared that it was not real and it might go away. So shortly after, 1, 2, 3 days after, they came to the conclusion that the way to make Erlang, to make money out of Erlang was to do products outside of Ericsson. Oh, I forgot. This document is from Anna Frederick. She's the one that was doing the Erlang news at that time. So yeah, like 3 days after, 4 days after, a few days after, there was most of the CS left. 12 people left Ericsson. And they created a company called Bluetail. And Jane was a chief executive in that company. And can you imagine 12 software engineers and 1 business people? It was a great combination. They were able to do such a great product in such a little time. The first thing they did was to fault-tolerant email called the mail robustifier. But eventually, just 18 months later, they just sold the company for $152 million. I will repeat. 18 months, $152 million, 12 people. Basically, they became millionaires. And it was that money, the money who was later used to found Klarna. For those of you, this is a payment company in Sweden, which is very, very well known. So this, I think, this came like to conclusions. From on the one hand, the fact that the money from Bluetail created Klarna and actually created other companies within Stockholm that were using Erlang as a technology. That changed like the texting of Stockholm. People, it actually created a lot of companies. And also, Erlang was proved to be a great technology to develop fast products, so companies were more eager to use Erlang. And so, I mean, the technology choices are often a champion on the inside, but like if you propose Erlang, you will be more eager to be accepted since this happened. And as Joe Armstrong said once, Jane is one of the unsung heroines of the Erlang history. She knew all sorts of things like how to start a company, how to raise venture capital, how to write a contract, how to sell software, things that we knew nothing about. Thank you, Jane. So what happened at Ericsson? Well, the OTP team continued to work. The bug was never lifted. They just never raised it. It just was forgotten. There were new managers. There were products using Erlang. And in the OTP team at Ericsson, there's been a few women. And I'm just going to tell the story of 2 of them. Probably the ones that have been there from the beginning. The first one is Siri Hansen. She's been in Ericsson since 1996 and from 2002 in the OTP team. And this is the best picture I could find from her on GitHub. She was a key to make the GPRS happen. I believe she fixed all the bugs. She was a team lead at times. She was a subsystem responsible at times. So it was such a great job for her. And now she's working at the middleware team. And her area of responsibility is basically anything related to OTP design principles. Contributions from her, GPRS, Crossland Viewer, Common Test, because everyone is using Common Test here every day. Is anyone not using Common Test here? No one. ETOP, tracing tools, and additions DVD. And she's responsible of release handling, logging, and she's actually working on a new logging prototype based on Ladder that is going to come out in a few months to standardize the API. Supervision and behaviors, got array, applications, lots. Who here has heard about the efficiency guide? The first edition I could find, I think it was in OTP 8, and it was written by this woman called Angela Anding. She's been 20 years at Ericsson, 15 years at the OTP team, and she's really, really active. Like if you download the source code of Erlang and you order by Blame, she will be number 6 on lines of code that are attributed to her. And she is the number for number of commits. You can see her down there. So basically done all the things SSL, TLS, crypto related. Help maintain the crypto application because there's always a new standard, something new that needs to get developed. But also is involved in lots of stuff. And now she's working on the TLS, and she's coming up in a couple of months. So to wrap up, open sourcing was the key for the Erlang spread, and it happened. Erlang was adopted by so many companies. It was teaching universities. People were doing their master theses, their PhDs, all around the world. And honestly, when I started this journey, when I proposed this talk, I was really concerned I could not find enough people to talk about. After all, there are not many women in the Erlang community. Are we, like, what can we be, 5% at most, really? And when some people found out I was doing this, they did not understand why, and others said that my credibility could be affected. My credibility as a software engineer will be compromised, and I guess that's a price I'm going to pay to give this talk. If I had time, I could talk about so many things. I've barely started. Like, I would talk about how the Erlang research is driven by women. Women like Melinda Talk, Quicken Lee, Laura Castro, Clara Bernag, Natalia Ticina. They've done so many amazing things. I would talk about Anna Nisler, founding the Elixir Bridge here in San Francisco, giving free classes of Elixir every couple of months to people in minorities. I would talk about people like Annette Vinorusa with AntidoteDB, Victoria Fordos, who was the lead on the Wombat AIM project, and so many more. But I don't have time. I asked Francesco for more time. He wasn't really willing to give me 5 hours for this talk. So then I found myself a few days ago cutting half of my slides. But here you have them, some heroes. You have some of them, women that created an ecosystem to grow Erlang, that use it when no one believed in them and has helped grow the language. People that's spreading it, people that's researching on it. Please join me thanking them. Thank you. Please tweet about them, tell their stories. Thank them. There's one last thing I want to add. 1984, the year in which this talk started, was also the year in which the percentage of women in tech started to decrease. Up until then, some say that we invented the industry. It was a time in which we were more than 60% Erlang women programmers. Not Erlang women programmers. And some say that the women in tech started to decrease because of the introduction of the personal computer, because it was targeted mostly to men, and because of the gaming purposes. Others say that as doing computer programming became a prestigious profession, and because of that it was better paid, it was so well paid, men became a little bit more interested on doing those jobs, and suddenly the person grew. The thing is that numbers of women in tech are still decreasing nowadays. Like, when I started studying, I think we were 20%, and I think we are just a little bit over that. So there's something else I need from you. I need you to help me grow this list of women. I need you to start hiring more women. I need to start mentoring more women. I need you to help them grow. I need you to recognize their work, to give that visibility, to encourage them to give more talks, to write blogs, and to be more public. Because we need to create the new role models that will help us grow a more diverse community. The role models that the younger generations can look up to. Thank you.